Get advice on aliens to ghosts, demons to angels, and from shadow people to the outlandish. Explore the paranormal with Heidi Hollis. The Outlander.
We're here. I know, and you are too. We are giving you advice and insight on outlandish topics, and the phone lines are open. Don't be shy, everybody. 1-888-919-2355. Okay, guess what? We're going to get into some juicy stuff this evening. I am excited. I hope you guys are too. All right, Konrad Kulczyk, who was born in Poland, where he studied engineering at the Technical University of Warsaw. Soon after, he moved to England, where in 1971 he was awarded a Ph.D. at the University of Surrey. He spent several years doing research in the field of laser applications and published several papers on the subject. His interests include psychology, philosophy, ancient civilizations, and religions. While working in Portugal in the 80s, he came in contact with a book about events in Fatima. This triggered his interest in this topic, which eventually led to the writing of his book, An Interest in Alien Intervention, in his book called We Are Not Alone in the Universe. Everybody, welcome, Konrad Kulczyk. Woo! Everybody standing to their feet here, Konrad. How are you?
Well, good evening, Heidi. Good evening, everybody. I'm very pleased to be on your show.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you about this. I mean, the topic of Fatima, it just brings so much forward in people's minds. Can you tell us a little bit about it so people know what Fatima is?
Well, Fatima obviously is in general known as a Christian apparition, and it happened in 1917 when a figure of a lady appeared to 3 children. Well, what is really interesting that beside apparition, we have also 3 Fatima secrets, which were very popular, well publicized, and practically everybody probably heard about Fatima secrets. But there was also another event, which for me was probably the key event, I call it display in the sky, which somewhere is sort of omitted from the religious literature as well as from sort of general public. And when I read about this display in the sky, what really meant it was a rotating disc, more or less size of a sun, shaking, falling to earth, and basically, causing quite an upset of people watching it. And really, I concentrated really on the part of the obviously display, and this is why I was interested, because this display was observed by 50,000 people. Many of the witnesses were unbelievers, atheists, so we not really say that it was sort of religious bias in reporting the event. This is what I felt, that this is very, I would call it neutral, objective, reliable witnesses describe this event. And this is why, basically, I decided to investigate this further.
So how did you go about investigating this? Were you able to actually locate other witnesses to this? You got a collection of people to describe what they'd seen?
Well, what's really happened that basically the Fatima events are quite well documented.
Yeah, because this is 1917 you're speaking
of.
That's
right,
this
yes.
Is some time ago.
Well, that is why what is advantage of this, because that time, for example, the children who seen the lady, they were interviewed practically almost immediately after the apparition. But after the display in the sky, obviously we're talking about 50,000 people. Many of them were obviously journalists from newspapers, writers, doctors, scientists. So there's quite a large group of people, I call it educated people, who could describe these events quite accurately. And what most important is they wrote down their statements. So therefore, what I'm saying is easy to investigate because obviously there are so many statements. We're talking about approximately about 100, let's say, written statements. So it is really a question of analyzing the statements. Obviously, not all the statements are identical, the same, because people would see things differently. But obviously, there is quite a common description. And what really happened is that when I was in Portugal, I came about a book written by a historian about Fatima. And this lady had access to the archive, to the Fatima archives. And from this archive, really she picked up quite a large number of these statements and put in her book. Therefore, really, I had, in the sense, easy life, because really for me, book was in Portuguese, but I have to sort of learn, obviously, this language. But otherwise, really, I studied these statements, and this is really how I started my investigation and how I arrived to my conclusions.
I see. And you looked at it in an objective manner. I just to point out something. I had somebody on a few weeks ago that was studied the Shroud of Turin and came to the conclusion. Objective conclusion, saying, "Wow, this had to have been exposed to some incredible energy to have created this impression of Jesus' face upon this cloth." And I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. So you scientifically proven this? He's like, yes. And it goes to show that Jesus was a regular man. And I'm like, well, put the brakes on. What? To me, it proves just the opposite, that this was a fantastic event. And then, his partner chimes in. He's like, well, you have to understand his religious belief is Judaism. So I just, then some subjective, information comes into it, and it's not objective anymore. So it was a little bit like, wow, so you looked at this from the perspective of someone who has just fully, truly taken this in for what it is, and I think I've heard of this. They called it the Dancing Sun event or something like that, wasn't it? For this sun-like apparition that danced around the sky and carried on. So now, and these three children that witnessed this, they were receiving messages. Were they receiving these messages very much like, were other people hearing the voices, or was this like telepathy, like people report with alien beings these days, that also led you to believe this is not necessarily a religious event? Where are you at with that?
Well, I think children hear the voices. It is difficult to say was telepathic because only they could hear voices. But the whole apparition, I believe, was physical, because the figure of a lady who appeared to children was extremely bright, and was so bright that effectively almost blind the children, and they have to close their eyes. So this was a physical, obviously they described this later on, but this was very strong physical discomfort. So obviously, if it was any, let's call it hypnotic communication, I don't believe that lowering the sight would help, in the perception of light.
Right.
So my feel is that truly it was proper communication to children, and it was a physical. Another way we're talking about, obviously not purely sort of based on belief or hypnosis or something which we imagine, obviously, but something which physically happened to the children.
Interesting. So do tell, what have been some of your when you read through some of these events and these accounts from other people, what were some of the patterns that you were seeing? I mean, were people having religious experiences, or what was it that you were finding?
Well, what I really concentrated probably more on people's not having religious experience, because obviously, from my point of view, it is a little bit unsafe to purely rely on religious experience, because obviously people can be influenced by their belief, and very often, their experience could be undermined by other people or critical. So for me, it was quite important that many non-believers, atheists, or almost people hostile to the church, to the religion, which was that time quite common in Portugal, basically could see the same, obviously, picture of this display. So I think this really makes it really genuine, again, physical display, because some people, for example, observe this, as we call it, the dancing sun or jumping sun. They observe through binoculars. So again, we cannot say that it was some, hypnotic experience or some imagination. It was, again, must be truly physical experience watching, let's call it, this dancing sun. Obviously, we have to say straight away that it wasn't obviously sun which was dancing, but again, this is why we're coming, that it was in my opinion, a laser display, which another way the disc was projected such a way that could be seen by, I was saying, about 50,000 people. And when we're talking about, we mentioned this dancing or shaking. Well, this is very common phenomena observed when you have a laser beam moving through the atmosphere. And as you know, atmosphere is hot and air is moving up and down. And essentially, the laser beam obviously will be diffracted or deflected and will be moving up and down or left or right, but essentially up and down. So what we observe, and it was again stated by so many witnesses, this jumping or the dancing sun was really the result of laser light traveling through the Earth's atmosphere. So I think that is one of the obviously very important proofs of the, again, genuine, I call it physical phenomena which took part, not psychological phenomena.
Now, but you said it looked like a disc, so it didn't have any solid mass to it from what people described. It was truly just a light.
Well, this was sort of like a silver matte and a changing colors disc. Again, it was not really solid because was changing color. Another way could be from silver, could be red, orange, purple, blue, green, whatever, all different colors, and also was rotating, and rotating sometimes was like throwing flames around. Well, it looks like throwing flames, like the Catherine wheel. So basically, it was quite a spectacular event. So looking at from this point of view, couldn't be a solid object. because not talking about rotation, but for example, again, rotation was visible, for example, mainly on the edges of the disk. So I think it's the whole, going into detail in description, I would say would have to exclude that it was a solid object. It has to be I call it optical projections.
Okay.
And obviously you can project, as we know, we have now laser shows where you can project pictures on clouds. So you can on the sky. So this was exactly there were clouds, and on this cloud was essentially this laser display was showing this disk.
So if this was a laser show, what was the purpose and who was behind this? I mean, wow, that's a big one. That's a doozy of a show to do, and just to make people drop their jaws. Why? And what were these revelations? You said there were 3 secrets that were given. What's the correlation with all of this?
Well, I think let's look really into the purpose of this show. Maybe this really explains. I have to pick up a bit of history. I mean, Portugal went through sort of revolution in 1910, and the power was taken over by very, let's call it, atheistic government, whose basically their purpose was to remove religion from Portugal. So it was many years before persecution of Christian or religion in Russia happened. This happened almost, I would say, almost 10, 15 years earlier in Portugal. So Portugal was going through that time, which is not really widely known, so the sort of like convulsion of internal struggle. And obviously the fight with church, fighting with clergies, with beliefs, but the essential objective was the government saying in 2 generations we want to remove all the religion. So I think the purpose of Fatima was to support these religious feelings in Portugal. Another way to somewhere prevent the forces, I don't want to call it evil, but forces which would be destroying Portugal, destroying belief, destroying religion, would win otherwise. So that was really the main objectives of the Fatima, because really people believed that it was a religious apparition, and practically after the Fatima, very quickly, the government was changed, and the situation in Portugal was substantially changed.
Wow, that's some powerful experience.
So there is a purpose. Yes, there is a purpose of this, which is some. It was not purpose seen by children or by people observing this display, but the outcome of this, that the people, unbelievers who really watch this display, they came back and started believing. So it was like a renewal of religious life in Portugal.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Konrad, somebody has a question for you. We got a caller. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you doing, Heidi?
Hello, caller. Are you in there?
Yes. Heidi, can you hear me? Hello?
There you are. Who am I speaking to?
This is Victor. I sent in the email to you earlier, and you referenced it tonight on your show. How are you doing?
Great. It's good to hear you. I'm talking to this guest here. Did you have a question for him?
Yes. Well, I'm familiar with the Fatima incident, and I'm wondering if he knows about Project Bluebeam, which basically is a part of the HARP weapon system, and basically it utilizes holograms And now there's reports of strange noises around the world, and I think that's part of the program too. And if he believes it's part of like psychological warfare.
Did you get the question there, Konrad?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, no, I'm not familiar with specific this project, but obviously, what I'm saying is that how Fatima events were truly organized and what technology was used. Obviously, I cannot say for certain because obviously there's no record, there's no proof, except what children obviously describe. So the fact it was obviously, yes, there was a proposal that there was a holography use or whatever, but I mean, what I'm saying is, yes, if you have holography, obviously use lasers or in another way, coherent light. So I would say, yes, is this probable that, for example, that holography could be used for the purpose of display? But I think my conclusion was that it was, let's call it a technical display, that it was not a sort of purely, let's call it divine display, which affects directly people, but was rather a technical display which transmit information to, basically to children, in that case, or other people's senses. I don't know, does it answer your question?
Yes, actually it does. And I appreciate you taking the time to answer my question.
Thank you so much for writing in earlier too, Victor. That was a very powerful letter. I really appreciate it.
Okay. And I forgot to mention in the letter the place that I was staying at the time of the event, McLaren Hall, is located in El Monte, California. So if
that
you
helps.
want to reference that later. Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. So if anybody writes me, I'll definitely forward that on to you so you can compare notes.
Okay, please do, and give them my email address as well. I'll be happy to communicate with anybody about
Awesome.
that.
Definitely.
Okay,
thank you so much once again, Victor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, Konrad, in speaking about, what he was saying, this Project Bluebeam, I mean, if something could be projected to make a people believe in one thing to change a whole nation, like you said, that Portugal was essentially being steered to get rid of religion. I mean, do you think that our governments and our world governments had access to such things, or your conclusions are that these were non-human beings that were intervening, correct?
Well, yes, but I mean, we're looking practically almost 100 years ago.
All right.
So, well, this is why one of my conclusion is that at this moment, obviously, exists technology that we could produce. Another way, obviously, people having resources could produce this type of display, this type of apparitions. So yes, obviously would influence other people and could obviously, whatever cause good or bad things. But so at this moment, probably this type of apparition or display would not make such an impact on people as was made, for example, 90 years ago. Because we have to remember the lasers were discovered in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
So basically before then, there was no other, let's call it technique, which, could produce this type of display.
But even over in this country, like, they'll tell us, like, the stealth bombers, they're the best thing ever, and they could avert radar. And then we find they've had them for, a couple of decades before they told us. So how do we really know they didn't have any lasers back then? I'm sorry, but I don't believe everything our governments tell us. But so I don't know. The human potential is something else. But so essentially, this display was done, and now there have been other reportings around the world of sightings of Holy Mary, Mother Mary, like Medjugorje. I mean, what distinguishes Fatima from other experiences, unexplained events like this?
Well, I think yes, there is a very, very important difference, and this is probably really the main reason why I started really investigating Fatima, because obviously you are quite right. There are something like talking about almost thousands of reported apparition and visions, and even officially recognized by church. We're talking about at least probably a dozen recognized by church apparitions. Well, the main reason really what distinguishes Fatima is that the apparition were predicted. And as well as the display in the sky was predicted. And prediction was done in the Portuguese newspaper. Another way, 2 months before the first apparition was sort of type of, well, I call it advertisement, which shows date of the apparition, another way, the 13th of May 1917, with some general text. But obviously, it was a bit of text was a bit of coded, but the date and saying that will be a very important events will happen for the whole Portugal was definitely stated. And the copies of this new newspaper obviously are available in the library. So this is not a trick or something you can do it, because the original copies printed obviously can be checked, that that's really happened. So we're having this type of prediction sort of never happened before and after for any other apparition, or as a matter of fact, any other paranormal events.
Not any major ones like that. Well, we got to go to our first break here, Konrad. You guys, you're listening to me, Heidi Hollis, the Outlander, on Inception Radio Network, and we're talking about Fatima, and that was an interesting fact I did not know, that Fatima is different because the events were predicted. Now, so if these are predicted, so people were able to, crowd in, like you said, 50,000 people witnessed what was going on there. I mean, now, where are you at with your research when you've come to this conclusion? This is different. I think this is a laser. You're an expert in lasers with your PhD and so much background. I mean, how did you get to the conclusion that where you're at and thinking that this was done by some other higher intelligence?
Well, I think this is what we mentioned before. When you have prediction, I mean, who can predict events like this? That's. I mean, the only events could be predicted by the organizers. I mean, as a matter of fact, that's. I mean, even when I look maybe sometimes we do not appreciate how difficult it is to predict even very common event. And, one of sort of giving example that if we see, for example, a crossroad, a pink Cadillac sort of passing, we can say, well, it's very strange, but nothing special.
Right.
But if you try to predict place and time that this pink Cadillac will pass this junction or crossroad, it's impossible practically. It's probably easier is to hit a jackpot than to do prediction. So immediately, I focus on this prediction and saying, if it was predicted, and also the display was predicted 3 months in advance. So we're having 2 predictions which were fully documented. So as a scientist, I cannot really reject this prediction because it is mathematics almost, if you know what I mean.
Right. Now,
So this is a critical, in my belief, in my conviction, this was almost obviously critical argument, which I mean, this is what I concentrate and I look into other apparition, and also I look into other paranormal events and also UFO events. Okay, I don't say I've done thorough investigation, but so far I could not find any, I could say almost any paranormal event which was predicted several months in advance. And so that is what I mean. This is why Fatima is so outstanding in this field, in this area of paranormal events. And this is why, I focus on this event, because there is something so unusual.
True.
So
it definitely does. So now, you've got that this something organized this to have taken place. So you being a scientist to say, I think we're not alone in this universe, the title of your book, and that some beings did this. Why would they intervene in human affairs? They don't have any, I don't know, they don't have any numbers in the game. Why would they do that?
Well, that's took me quite a long time to basically reach this conclusion. I mean, obviously, we really have to look this way. When I establish that it was really, let's call it extraterrestrial intelligent beings were responsible for this, obviously the immediate question was, why would they organize this? But the first question was, okay, if they organized basically with this apparition, or let's call it event in Portugal, did they intervene in human affairs before? So it wasn't really that in Portugal was sort of like one-off event special. Portugal was not really, in the sense, anything special from their point of view. It looks to me like it was a part of their policy or decision to intervene in human affairs. And therefore I look really into other events in the human history which really would indicate this some sort of intervention. And obviously events which are covered in mystery, somewhere that we are not able to explain really what's really happened. And one obviously the key event was the origins of the first civilizations, because this is a very hot topic even now, and historians, scientists, academics, basically they don't have any firm, uniform conviction how this civilization could start it. And when I look into this civilization, basically what they started almost instantaneously, suddenly. It was not sort of like a slow evolution, development, the slow improvement. Almost right from the beginning, we have fully developed civilization. Another way, we're having obviously archaeological evidence, which was dug up, which could be well dated, as you know. So how this happened that now we're talking about mainly two civilizations in Sumer and in Egypt, how they really pop out just from nowhere. And
that's interesting, but from a light show to, them essentially messing with our DNA from Neanderthal man to, we're building pyramids. Is that what you're suggesting, that they really got into the core of what we are?
Well, that's right, because I was working backwards, if you know what I mean. I was okay. Going from Portugal, from Fatima, and trying to work backwards, looking into other events.
I see.
Really, mystery basically. Yes, and yes, basically you have to go and ask, let's call it logical questions. Okay, so basically question, yes, if this civilization just jump out, just like from a box, how they could arise, how they could originate. And okay, so my study looked into the, obviously, let's call it pre-civilization people, like Neolithic people, which is very primitive barbarian people. And again, this looked at these people, there was no way could develop sophisticated civilization. What I want to really say is, okay, we see when we talk about, Sumer or Egypt, we see sort of temples, pyramids, because, oh gosh, these pyramids are fantastic, isn't it? Or sphinx, whatever. But I look quite a different contribution of this civilization. And what you find that in this civilization, they develop, for example, new institution, for example, like justice, develop new management skill, they develop new ethics, they develop new humanitarian approach to people, they develop charity, they provided equal rights for men and women. Something, another way, if you look from the Neolithic guy who was sort of doing a bit of agriculture somewhere, we're jumping to sort of basically new society, which is practically no different than ours. As a matter of fact, all our achievements originated from Sumer and Egypt. And this is not my opinion, it was Professor Kramer, who is expert in Sumer. Basically, this is his opinion, that without Sumer would not exist our Western civilization. Okay, so basically we're looking not only sort of visible achievements in architecture, builder, but achievements in human consciousness, achievements in human intelligence, because to manage very complex project like irrigation project, they built thousands of miles of canals, dams, and waterways and whatever. It was something which is also on the scale of a sort of modern world. So my problem was how this jump in all this progress could be possible. And it was definitely jump, not a slow development. So conclusion was that all this information had to be developed or practiced somewhere else, because Sumer and Egypt already, when people arrived in Sumer and Egypt, they already possessed full knowledge. There's no sign, again, this archaeologist confirms, there is no sign of real development, progress, neither in Sumer nor in Egypt. So the real progress, real change happens somewhere else. And this is why I'm proposing this, I call it proto-civilization, or sometimes we can call it, I call it New Atlantis. But it's something when effectively all the knowledge, and it was a huge amount of knowledge. I didn't mention medicine, I didn't mention technology, metallurgy, all invention, writing and so on. They had to be developed somewhere else.
I see. I see where you're going with it. I don't think I've heard someone look at it more from that perspective, how, libraries and the written language first developed there, essentially, like you're saying, out of nowhere. So, and I think a lot of people have concluded that they must have gotten this information from elsewhere, but everybody's like, where's that hard evidence? But that is kind of hard evidence, you're saying, because there is no in-between from primitive man to a society all of a sudden.
That's right, yes. That's right. There is no, let's call it no links, like in evolution, we can say missing links we're talking about. It's exactly the same repetition in civilization. There is a missing link between the Neolithic society, which is also well searched, and we know quite a lot about them, and civilization, which we know. There's nothing in between. And therefore, whatever this in between happen somewhere in another place. But now we're coming to the, if happen in another place, we're coming to the same problem. It would take, I would say thousands of years to develop this, and who would develop this technology? Who developed these new ideas, new concepts, new religions? And this is obviously my hypothesis. I cannot say that I have a full proof of this, but what's really happened is that Neolithic man was not really capable of absorbing this knowledge, not absorbing this concept. This conscious. His conscious was on very primitive, almost semi-animal sort of type of levels. And now we effectively have a fully fledged modern human beings. So my hypothesis is that okay, you can develop human race by education. It's true. We're doing this all the time now, as we know. Yes, we provide education to people, and they slowly increasing. But we know also very well that it's an extremely slow process. So the only rapid development is possible by, let's call it, genetic intervention. And that is, otherwise I can't see any other way really. So we have either education or intervention. Genetic intervention is relatively very quick because it means that you need few generations, obviously, to establish, let's call it, a new, more intelligent people. We're not talking about races. This is, I want to emphasize that that's what study shows, that quite reverse. There is no difference in intelligence or conscience between sort of different races, because we are all the same. But however, also we know very well there's a huge difference if you're looking on people around us in intelligence and in conscience.
Oh, I would say so. I live in Chicago. Lots of killing over here. A lot of Neanderthals running around doing horrible things to each other. I mean, I don't know. People are gun crazy over here. But you also come to the conclusion that extraterrestrials had intervened in helping to remove the danger of communism in Russia. I mean, can you explain what do you mean by that?
Well, that is obviously another mystery. Certainly it's mystery for me because I live in communist country for 25 years. I knew the communist system inside out. I studied sort of communism when I came to the West, so I understand the operation. And basically the system in Russia was so perfect as a totalitarian, system, perfect, of giving practically total control over people. There was no other possibility that this system could collapse on its own or could be attacked from outside, because Russia was a very powerful country, obviously. Now, so talking about the huge country, powerful country, which obviously threatening whole world, because communists obviously wanted to introduce communism in the whole world. I was taught, the other objectives, for communists is all other countries in the world, including United States, will be communist.
Oh my!
So that was there was no joke. This is what I'm saying.
I believe it. My grandparents left Poland, a long time ago too, because they didn't like it. So
this was a real danger. But this was thousands of tanks. Was 80% of Russia was working in armament industry. This is why people were so poor. So there was an extremely danger that Russia will provoke probably war and go into war, conquer Europe, especially when Russia slowly was falling behind the United States in technology. was even more danger, because they would try to obviously gain the foothold in the whole Europe. Not to mention they provide, obviously already was communist, were in China, Vietnam, and so on. What I'm saying is that Russia, the communism is not like just another totalitarian system, is the something which completely would destroy human race. And I know this because I felt this on myself. You're talking about, the all what our civilization, I'm talking about now from almost the ancient civilization, from the first civilization till now, for the last 5,000 years, what we developed was essentially totally abandoned in Russia. So we're looking not on just another country conquering another country. We're talking about introducing worldwide, totally inhuman, hostile system of power. System would destroy people, humanity.
So you're suggesting that these alien beings have been going around intervening because they're just so darn good and positive, and so they're rescuing us from ourselves? I mean, do you feel that they're all good?
It looks like, because you mentioned Russia, yes, but also I mentioned in my book also Nazi Germany and the atom bomb, which obviously was abandoned. So we're talking about basically two. I mean, again, Nazi Germany was as bad as Russia, maybe not as bad in a sense, but so it was similar, destroying mentality of people, brainwashing people, again rejecting all, let's call it, humanitarian values which we develop. So what you're saying? Yes, would these people coming and doing goodies for us and whatever, and this was the probably more difficult part in my book, and also which took me some time to basically discover, to develop. Why would these extraterrestrial beings intervene in our affairs?
Right.
I'm not supporting theories. They're doing some like writers. They're doing this for fun, for joy, for entertainment, or because they are bored to death, whatever. We're talking about beings which are sort of like million years, or maybe more, hundreds million years more advanced than ourselves. So we're not talking about something similar to us, something which only using superior technology, but superior conscience and mind.
But just as there are positive geniuses, there are some pretty rotten ones out there. I lean towards there being some bad aliens and some good ones. But these ones that are intervening to save our hide, I would say that they would be more positive. But you suggest that they're still intervening now. We only got a few minutes left to the show, so I want you to point out some of the things that you think they're still up to. I mean, what are they doing?
Well, obviously, I'm talking about these beings, which are, let's call it, we could call it like, from a religious point of view, like angel, like, and maybe the angels, there is some connection. The religion took it somewhere from these beings. But, okay, what I'm convinced the objective of these beings is that because they try, which again we didn't talk much about, the develop human consciousness, and this is another way bring humans towards God, because God has the highest consciousness, and therefore we're looking on the development of human beings to higher and higher levels. And I think, as we know, whenever extraterrestrial beings are living, there is always limited amount of energy, and eventually, sun or stars are dying out, and the civilization will disappear. And in my opinion, these people are, let's call it, preparing humankind to take over the role, to basically carry on intelligence and consciousness in the universe. Another way, okay, this objective, maybe we're talking about million years. We're not talking about something that's going to happen tomorrow, but something which indicates for the progress. And this is why it's obviously the progress is going to be slow, but eventually I believe they will reach the level of these extraterrestrial beings, and we take over their role in the universe.
I see where you're going, because there are others that kind of approach this in a more spiritual, new agey way, and they say we're going to rejoin the Galactic Federation of Planets, but we're too brutal right now, and we have to be honed and trained. So I see where you're going with this, and I see. I mean, looking at it from a scientific perspective, you have definitely a unique approach, and but starting from a religious format. Now, I have to ask you this, even though we got a couple minutes here. Have you made some people angry out there? I mean, you're saying the image of Mary showing up in Fatima was indeed not Mary. I mean, what's been the response that you've gotten?
I mean, people. Well, obviously, the image you're talking about, the Fatima.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, in Fatima was really like a figure about 4 feet high, which was like a doll, not moving when speaking, with not moving mouth, not moving lips, whatever. So it was obviously you cannot say yes, this was the Virgin Mary over there. This was a symbol, obviously, of something. So I don't think the people will feel that the Virgin Mary appears to people, because certainly didn't look like this. This was probably so artificial picture.
I see.
So very far from perfect.
Yeah.
Almost doll-like, not human.
Right.
So
I wanted to tell you something real quick here. We'll go over a couple of minutes, I guess. There was an article I read some years ago where this girl came out of her home, and her mother and her sister were on their knees looking up at this image in the sky of Holy Mary. And but the girl was facing the opposite direction and saw literally a UFO projecting the image of Mary. And she's saying, "Look behind you, there's a UFO." But her mother and sister were too in prayer and so, mystified by seeing Mary. But she contends to this day that, she saw what she saw. So I wish I knew where that article was and who the lady was, because I've always looked for it and I just can't find it. But it kind of backs up a little bit what you're saying. But how can people get a hold of your book? Because we're ending the show already, Konrad, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, the book is available on Amazon and on quite many other sites, and obviously the publisher is John Hunt Publishing.
And the title?
Is We Are Not Alone in the Universe.
I really, really want to thank you, Konrad Kulczyk, for coming on all the way from across the pond in the UK. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
But of course. All right, you guys. Remember, you can catch me here every Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Central. You've been listening to me, Heidi Hollis, the Outlander, on Inception Radio Network. Remembering always, if it's weird, we're here.